This week, I want to talk about the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. But before I even get into all of that, Happy New Year. I hope that you are ready to hit the ground running with me in 2025. And before we dive into the Let Them Theory, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and ring that little notification bell so that you never miss a tutorial or upload. Okay, so you already know that Mel Robbins is like my spirit animal when it comes to my business and just my overall well-being. She tells it like it is. She says things that other people are saying, but for some reason, when she says it, I hear it better. And this new book is no different. So I normally don't talk about an entire book here on the podcast. That's usually what my other podcast is for. But I have to with this one because I feel like if I don't, I'm going to end up doing an entire year of episodes just based on little bits of wisdom and quotes from this book. I'm not even done with it yet. Okay. So don't be surprised if I come back later in the year with more that I want to talk about this book and this whole concept. But I've been listening to the audiobook, which I don't always recommend doing. But in this case, I absolutely do. And I think when it comes to business and personal development authors, here's kind of the rule of thumb that I'm noticing. If the author is also a podcaster, you're probably going to like the audiobook better. If they're not, then I would just read the physical book because they're not going to be super comfortable when they're talking and it's just going to read a little bit stiff. But with Mel, of course, she is a podcaster. She does videos all the time. She's a pro at speaking. And so her audiobook is not only as good, I'm sure, as the physical book, but I would wager it's probably better because she, just like one of my other favorites, Pat Flynn, clearly embellishes and talks more freely than she would be writing it in the book. In fact, I'm almost curious now to get a copy of the hard copy book so that I can compare in some of the areas. Like, did she actually write that into the book or did she just say that when she was recording the audiobook? Because some of the stuff feels so natural and off the cuff that I can't tell if it really is natural and off the cuff or if she actually wrote it that way. Either way, highly recommend the audiobook. We were listening to it in the car as we were driving on our holiday road trip. I wish we'd had it on the way down, but she didn't release it until December 24th, and so I didn't have it till the way back home. But it's fantastic. And like I said, I'm not even done yet, mostly because my husband got as into the book as I did, and so I don't feel like I can listen without him because I feel like that would be like binge watching a Netflix show that we're watching together and watching without him. So I've been kind of slowing myself down and we're going to listen to it together. But there's already some things that I'm seeing how much it applies to my life as a business owner, specifically as a solopreneur, but honestly, just as an entrepreneur in general. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of those areas with you. Like I said, I am going to have more to say about this in the future, so don't be surprised if I come back to this book and this topic later in the podcast because there's just so much gold in there. But there was one thing in particular that really surprised me when she started saying it. I was like, I don't know, Mel. I might have to disagree with you on this one. But then I listened and I realized, wait a minute, maybe she just completely changed my opinion in one chapter of her book. So make sure you stick around to the end to hear that part because if you may feel or have felt the same way that I did, and this may completely change your perspective on it as well. But there's a few things that we need to talk about first. So the let them theory, high level, very, very basic. What she's talking about is letting other people, now we're only talking about adults here. She makes this very, very clear. This is not about dealing with children. So if you're a business owner, and that's the perspective I'm going to be coming from here, is we're talking about other full-grown adults that you're working with or that are competitors or that are colleagues or that are clients. So when I'm talking about the let them theory here, those are the relationships that I'm referring to and the only relationships that I'm referring to. But basically what it means is let those other people, whoever they are, be responsible for their own everything, their own actions, their own emotions, their own inaction, their own everything. It's their responsibility not mine. But the second half of it, and she makes this very, very clear as well, after you let them, then it comes let me. And this is about how you act and how you react to things. Because the reality is we're going to have feelings about what we're letting them do. And we can't just stop there and say, okay, let them and just stew in it. We then have to say, let me. And it's all about showing up the way that you are proud to show up, no matter what the situation is. So that's the high level. I mean, there are so many nuances. So this is why I still recommend get her book, because there's so much I can't cover here in just a brief podcast episode. But that's the high level. So there are 4 specific let thems that I felt coming up for me a lot while I was listening to this. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to just do my first kind of discussion, my first episode about this topic. And I think it's so timely to be talking about this at the beginning of a new year, because it can give us a complete mindset shift to make 2025 our most balanced and successful year ever. So we're going to talk about, like I said, these 4 let thems and then the let me's that I think go along with it. And at the very end, I'll come back to that thing that I mentioned at the beginning where she, I think, completely changed my opinion about something. Okay, so let them number 1. Let them number 1 as a business owner is let them decide not to work with you. That is a really, really hard one, especially if you are someone who does a lot of discovery calls, you get on sales calls, you probably don't even like doing it. It makes you feel super nervous. It makes you feel really uncomfortable and salesy if you're like me. And so when you have those calls, there's this huge amount of pressure that we put on ourselves to convince somebody that they need to hire us, or they need to join our academy in my case, or they need to work with us, right? And yes, obviously that is the goal on some levels of having those conversations, but this is making me realize something that, again, I've heard before. This is not some brand new piece of information, but in this context, it just feels different. We are having a mutual interview, really, when we're having a discovery call. And I think for me, and I know for many others, we feel as the business owner like we're the only ones being interviewed. We're the only ones on the spot. We have to do all the convincing. We're the ones who are going to win or lose in the situation. And I'm just realizing more and more, especially with this let them theory, that that is so not the case. This is the opportunity for us to see on both sides, is this even a right fit? I mean, especially if you're talking about a coaching situation or mentoring or something where personalities and relationships really, really matter. Let them decide that I am not right for them, right? Let them decide that you are not the right fit. Because here's the thing, if they make that decision, if they feel that way, then they're not the right fit. And you probably would have ended up, I don't want to say fighting with them, but like dragging them along all the way through this working relationship. And who wants to live like that? We want someone working with us that really, really wants to be working with us and is excited to be working with us, not somebody that we're dragging along. So let them decide not to work with me. Let me decide to show up in that discovery call to simply lay out what I have to offer, to not feel desperate, to not feel like I need to be salesy, to just explain what this person will get out of my academy or working with me as a Trello consultant or whatever it might be. Let me show up authentically. Let them see who I really am and what I really have to offer. And that's all I can do in the situation, right? At that point, they now have to decide, does that align with what they're looking for? And if it doesn't, and they need to go find someone else, let them. Okay? So that's let them number 1. Let them number 2, and this one is a lot harder for me, because when I decided to start the Tech Savvy Academy, I had all these dreams of having, obviously a huge academy with tons and tons of students in it. Then everybody was super engaged and just like chomping at the bit for the next resource to be released. And, always taking and completing each course as they came out. Like everything was going to be just like super engaged, super involved. That was what I dreamed. And I even told myself, if I see that somebody is disengaged or not following through on things and not showing up to courses or live events or whatever I might be offering, then I might talk to them and say, well, maybe you shouldn't be in the academy. Not because I don't want them there, but because I didn't want someone to be paying for something that they're not taking advantage of. And that's a really, really hard thing for me because obviously I want them to be getting the most out of it. I want to be able to help and serve them as best I can. But I also need to recognize that this is kind of like coming back to the discovery calls. It's not my responsibility to convince or guide or help my students show up for themselves. It's not my responsibility to help them get the most out of what they're paying for, right? That's their responsibility. So if they are going to pay for it month after month and not take courses and not show up to events, I need to let them. Now, that is a really, really hard thing for me. And I don't know how that applies or relates in your business. I mean, if you're doing one-on-one coaching with someone and they're not showing up to your sessions and things like that, that might be a little different because you might need to have a conversation there. But there's still some area, some aspect of let them involved there. If they're not going to do the work in between sessions and they show up and they're exactly where they were before, and you as the coach or you as the teacher feel like they're not progressing, they're not growing, they're not getting what I'm trying to help them get out of what they're paying me for me, that feels like a personal failure. But I'm needing to realize, no, I need to let them. When they are ready to prioritize it, they will show up and they will start taking advantage of it. And if they've been paying me for a while and not doing that yet, as hard as it is for me to accept that, I need to accept that. I need to let them. But there's that let me involved here too, right? And this is where let me show up with the most high quality tutorials, the best content that I can possibly provide to my students that I can put into the academy, create the best live events that they're going to be wanting to show up for. Let me do my part so that they're excited about the academy, right? They're excited to show up and work with me and that they're going to get my best every time they interact with me, whether it's through an online course or through an actual live session. Let them choose to not make space for it, not prioritize it. Let me show up in such a way that they want to prioritize it, right? So that's number 2. Number 3 for me is a little bit more related to the channel. So when I come on the channel here and I do tutorials or I talk to you here in the podcast, I'm sharing opinions. I'm giving my perspective. I'm showing how I would do something. And other people, other experts in the same fields are not going to agree with me. They're going to have different perspectives and different ways of doing things. And for me, it always kind of makes me feel a little insecure, especially if it comes to a tutorial that I've done where maybe I show someone how to do something and someone else says, oh no, there's a better way to do that. It makes me feel like, oh gosh, that's where that imposter syndrome just bubbles up to the surface. Do I even know what I'm talking about? Am I telling people the wrong things to do? This is what happens in my brain, right? But I need to recognize we're going to have different opinions. There's more than one way to do just about everything that I teach or talk about here on the channel. So if someone makes a comment or says something that is different than what I've said, or maybe even the opposite of what I've said, I need to let them disagree with me. And that is challenging because it makes me feel like I'm wrong, not like I'm assuming they're wrong, right? So I need to let them disagree with me, and it's okay. They can be right. They can be wrong. They can be whatever. We can both be right. That's something that I need to let go of and let them. But then as a let me make sure that I'm staying educated and that I'm doing my research and I'm learning the newest best practices and the new best ways to do things and the new tools that are available to people so that I can show up with authority and that authority is grounded in something and it's not old news, right? So let me make sure that I'm staying on top of things and that and also like when I'm talking about in like the podcast here where I'm just sharing my thoughts or what I might have gotten out of a specific quote or specific book, like I need to recognize that my values are going to show through in my opinions and someone else might have different values and so they're going to see it a different way. It doesn't make me right and them wrong or vice versa. Let them have their opinions, let them disagree with me and let me show up authentically with my values and make sure that I've been doing my homework so that I am teaching the best way that I know how to do something. And then the last thing I want to talk about is when it comes to competitors. So in this case, it's going to be let them seem or even be more successful than me. And this is going to tie into that thing at the very, very end. So kind of put a pin in this thought. But for me, this is like multifold. So whether it's somebody who is doing exactly what I do and they do tutorials and they teach people how to use tools and stuff like that, or maybe it's just another business coach, business mentor, or maybe it's just a completely different business, but it's somebody that I follow or watch and I'm seeing their business, their channel, their whatever grow and seem more successful than mine. Even if it actually is more successful than mine, let them. It doesn't have any impact on whether or not I am going to grow or I am going to find success. Let me show up, again, authentically align with my values and be growing my business, my channel, all of that the way that I can be proud of. And let me grow it into something that I'm actually going to want to live in for hopefully the rest of my, business journey, the rest of my career. So let them be more successful or just seem more successful if I suspect that maybe they're trying to come off like they're more successful than they actually are. And let me show up authentically, grow at my own pace, and do my own thing. Now, that last little piece, this is where she said something that I think almost directly disagrees with something that I've said maybe last year. I don't remember, but something that I say a lot. And so I'm sure I've said it at some point here on the channel or on the podcast. So I said comparison is a thief of joy. Comparison kills creativity, all of those things. And I do believe that those are true. But what she said was comparison is a teacher. And here's where I had to kind of wrap my mind around it because I am all about putting those blinders on. Don't look at what other people are doing. Just do my own thing. And to a large extent, I still think that that is a wise thing to do. But what she's talking about is in the situation, like I was saying a minute ago, where you see somebody who is maybe in the same field or just a similar field as you, and they are finding success where you are not. Now, if you are comparing yourself in situations or in circumstances that you can't do anything about. For example, just their personality and how they show up. And, I could try to change my personality, but I wouldn't want to. Can I become what they are to achieve the success that they're becoming? If the answer is no, if there's nothing I can do, and I think Mel says, if there's nothing you can do in the next 10 seconds to change that, then you need to let that go because that is a comparison thing that is a waste of time. I can't make myself taller. I can't change things about myself physically. I mean, short of plastic surgery or something. Things like that, I can't do something in the next 10 seconds to change that. So if what I'm comparing myself to and their success, whatever it is that they have that I don't have, if it is something that is like that I can't do anything about, then that I need to put my blinders on and just move forward in my own way and do my own thing. But if it's something I can do something about, if they're marketing themselves better than I am, if they have designed their courses in a more streamlined, more effective way than I am, if they are getting better engagement with their community because of something that they are doing, then that's where Mel is saying, let comparison be a teacher. Let them succeed before me, because their ability to succeed, as I already said, does not prevent me from succeeding, but they're going ahead of me so I can learn from what they're doing. Now, if there's someone who this is their business to teach that stuff, then I can hire them and learn exactly what they're doing, or I can just watch and see what seems to be working and what doesn't work. And now, I am not big at all on copying other people. I do not, and I've definitely said this before, I do not agree with, buying someone's blueprint or following 100% exactly what somebody else is doing, the exact same post, but like with your own branding. I don't think that works. But I can learn from the concepts, the ideas, the basics of what somebody is doing. I can take the things that are a challenge for me and I can look at what's working for them and I can apply their approach in my business and let it teach me how to achieve my goals. And now I loved that Mel did address the fact that there is a level of comparison that's like toxic. And then there's a type of comparison like this that can be your teacher. And so while I feel like it's kind of changed my opinion, changed my perspective, I think really it's just added to, because I still have the perspective I had about comparison is bad if you're comparing things that you can't do anything about. But seeing this comparison as a teacher, when it is something you can do, something that you can try, something that you can apply in your own business, then absolutely comparison could be a teacher. So that's my new mindset shift for 2025 when it comes to my business, this comparison. Let them, let me, all of this. And I'm going to keep listening to this book, and I will definitely come back when there are more bits of wisdom to share. But I'm curious, a couple of things. Number one, have you already gotten this book? Are you listening to the audiobook? Did you get the physical book? If you haven't, what are you waiting for? This one is, it's so great for everyone, but I think for business owners, there's a special application from this book that none of us can afford to miss out on, no matter where you are in your business journey. If you have it already, let me know in the comments what chapter are you on. If you don't have it yet, I will put a link to the book in the description because you need to get it. Whether you're listening or reading or not, you just heard a little bit from me as to what this theory is about. So I'm curious, what let them comes to mind for you first when it comes to your business? What do you need to let them? Who do you need to let? Is this clients? Is this competitors? Is this maybe family who is not supportive yet of your business and what you're trying to do? Like, what let them is coming up for you? And what let me needs to go along with it? Let me know in the comments. I hope you liked that video, and more importantly, that you found it helpful. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing it with a fellow solopreneur. And make sure you check out the description for links to how we can connect and maybe even work together.